You bought your very first tarot deck. So, what do you do next? Hello, friends. My name is Ashley, and I am the creator here for Wildly Ashley. Today, we are going to be talking about what to do when you get your very first tarot deck, what to expect, and the things that you can do to prepare yourself to start reading tarot for yourself. I am a huge believer in people reading tarot for themselves. And it's a lot of fun to get readings done by other people, to even watch readings on YouTube. I still do a ton of YouTube readings for other people, and I still watch a ton of other people's content and YouTube readings. It's just a fun way to connect with other people, see and maybe hear other messages that people might give you. But I think one of the most valuable tools is to learn how to read for yourself. So, the first place to start is by getting your deck. Now, buying a deck is probably only somewhat necessary. You can use free tarot apps with cards and just pull random cards from some apps. You can even create your very own tarot deck. You can get some 3x5 note cards and write down all of the cards. You know, 100 pack of 3x5 note cards is less than $3. You can even get some decks as cheap as $10 on Amazon or... Hi, buddy. You can even get some decks as cheap as $10 on Amazon. And I have a few of my favorite decks linked in the description box on almost all of my videos, just to have some, easy access stuff. The deck we're going to be using today is a deck that is very new to me. It was given to me as a gift by my sister for my birthday last year. And I've just never gotten around to doing any sort of reading or anything like that with this deck. Although it is a very beautiful deck, and I'm going to share it with you here real quick. The deck in question is this one here. It's the Queer Tarot by Ashley and Chess. And what I really like about this deck is that this is a deck designed with inclusivity in mind. This deck is created with models from real life. These are real life people, real life models. And one of the things that I really like about this deck is that it is inclusive for queer people, people with disabilities, and people of different ethnicities, body types, anything you can think of, you name it. This deck has some form of representation for almost all people and all beings. This deck comes with a nice little guidebook that tells you a little bit about how this deck was created. In the deck, it even includes the model's name as well as their pronouns, so that way you can make sure that you are referencing these people with proper pronouns, as well as some more, in-depth sections with card pictures. And right at the very beginning of the book, it talks about how this deck was created, where the artwork comes from. All of the artwork on these cards are made from, I think it's risographs, drawing, painting, printing. There we go. And that's basically where I guess you take a art piece and you print it in layers of the colors. And so all of these cards are actually unique cards, and they all can be a little bit different from each other. So every deck that you get is going to be unique. It's going to be slightly different than, your friend's deck that they get. There'll be different individual pieces that make up unique artwork for this deck. So it's just a really cool deck to have. It's inclusive and it's really beautiful. So when you get your new deck, you're going to open it up. And if you are getting a single deck, it may or may not come with a guidebook. I have a deck that actually comes with, even just a very thin paper guidebook like this. And I'm not a huge fan of these, but most decks come with at least a tiny paper guidebook like this. And so that's always really helpful if you're starting out. My favorite deck, Mystic Mondays, has a very small guidebook that comes with it like this. And what I like about Mystic Mondays deck and guidebook is that it includes meanings for the uprights and the reversals. It even includes planet or zodiac sign associations with the cards, except for when you get into the suits. We'll take a look at some other decks some other time. I'll maybe do a review video where I talk about some other decks, maybe even my personal collection here. So anyway, back to it. When you get your new deck, you're going to have some sort of, maybe a guidebook, and you're going to need to open your box here. You're going to need to open your box. And when you get your deck, your cards are going to be in order. And I can kind of show you here some of the cards from this deck. We have the Magician here. We have, let's try to find one. Yeah, this one is the Strength card, which shows, you know, a person of color. We have the Five of Pentacles, which shows, you know, a couple different people, one of which is using, you know, a guiding cane. And I think there was even someone in here, a card that had someone that uses an ostomy bag, which I was really excited to see. There's even some people with, I think, a wheelchair. This person has like some sort of continuous heart monitor or something on them, you know, some cat. I don't think the people on the internet want to see your bits. Anyway, so this deck is just really fun. It has a lot of, you know, as we said, it has inclusivity. It has all sorts of different people featured. And look, this person even has some sort of head covering for the Page of Pentacles here. So I just really like that it has, you know, a bunch of representation. So when you get your deck, it's most likely going to be organized in order. It's probably going to go straight from the major arcana 0 through 21, and then it's going to go through each of the suits in exact numerical order. So when you get your deck, the very first thing you're going to need to do is shuffle it. You can even just take a look, separate all of the cards one by one, and take a look at them. Try to, you know, put them in different piles and get them all mixed up a little bit. This deck is a little bit thicker than what I would normally recommend certain shuffling techniques with. One of the easiest shuffling techniques is to just hold your deck from the side like this and push cards back and forth. When you get your deck for the first time like this, it's going to be really hard to do that, so you maybe want to pre-separate your cards a little bit. Some decks are thin and flexible enough, like my traditional Rider Waite deck here. Some decks are thin and flexible enough that you can actually just shuffle them like a traditional deck of cards. That was maybe not my best shuffle, but, you know, it's kind of hard to do it up here versus down here. Let's see. That one was a little better. But, you know, some of them you can shuffle like that. You can even take them and throw them all out on the ground, mix them up with your hands a little bit. But just, you know, get them mixed up a little bit. So that way when you do try your very first reading with your deck, you have things mixed up and you're not just getting a message in the, you know, chronological order of the deck. Another thing that a lot of people like to do for their very first deck is they like to perform some sort of cleansing for it. So your deck may come from a facility where a lot of other people have touched it or maybe handled it, and so some people don't want to risk having that energy on their deck, and so they recommend cleansing it. There's a lot of different ways to cleanse. Even sometimes shuffling your deck can be considered a sort of cleansing. One of my favorite ways is to smoke cleanse with like maybe a little piece of incense. Another great way to do it is to leave it out in the moonlight so that you can get a nice moon cleansing and even a little bit of a charge on your deck. Whatever your favorite cleansing technique is besides water, don't use water on your cards obviously, but just give your deck a little cleanse and then you can go ahead and get started with doing your very first reading. One of my favorite things to recommend for your very first reading is to do a deck interview. What do we mean when we say an interview? All decks, with their artwork, with their creators, and everything else, are going to have different energies to work with, different vibes, in a sense. And some decks have energies that can work really, really well with you, and energies that maybe are a little bit more complicated. I like to say all of my decks have personalities, and that kind of comes from the style of artwork that is on the decks and the way that you interact with the deck itself. So for example, you see me often on the channel use this deck here, which is my Mystic Mondays deck. This deck is one of my favorites to use simply because the artwork is so bright and happy and vibrant. I feel like this deck often gives a very positive message a lot of the time. And The best beginner deck is just the traditional Rider-Waite. This one has a lot of different artwork and symbolism in it that makes it really easy as a beginner to look for clues within the artwork to try and figure out the meaning behind the cards. One of my other decks here, the Wild Unknown Tarot deck. This one, I actually have the box out separate. This one was actually my very first tarot deck that I ever bought. And this deck is what I like to call my no BS deck, because every time that I do a reading from this deck, I feel like it is very, very honest, very to the point. There is no sugarcoating from this deck. And so when I need a very clear answer, when I need someone to kind of give me a kick in the pants a little bit, and to tell me straight up what I need to do or what the situation is, what's going on, I consult this deck, because this deck I know will give me a straight answer. And sometimes we need to hear those harder messages so that we can actually make the changes that we need to succeed. Anyway, that's just a little quick note from here. But doing a deck interview is actually one of the best ways to get to know your deck, so that way you can use it for its best purposes. Anyway, let's go ahead and switch to a top-down view now, and I can go ahead and show you what my deck interview process looks like. Alright, so as you can see here, we have switched to a top-down viewpoint. I'm going to kind of show you the deck here a little bit. You can see that this deck has been shuffled very well. We have cards not in their chronological orders. They're mixed up, they're varied. You can see we have some reversals, uprights, different things like that. I just love this deck so much. We see so many varied people, bodies, shapes, and, you know, identities on here that I just think this deck is really, really awesome. And, you know, it was a gift from my sister for my birthday. So this deck is pretty special to me. And I love having it around. I love that the models for the people here on the deck are real life people. And, you know, as I said in the guidebook, it tells you all of their names. It gives you their pronouns so that you can refer to them properly, and I just think it's a really cool deck. So anyway, yeah, as you can see, it's all mixed up, everything is shuffled, and we are ready to go ahead and get started with our deck interview process. So a deck interview can be as complicated or as simple as you want to make it. We're going to make this a very simple reading, and we're just going to do a 3-card tarot spread here. And for this interview, what we are going to ask for card number 1 is, tell me a bit about yourself. Let's get to know this deck. We're going to ask, deck, tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, one of my favorite ways to ask questions is to keep shuffling, because what happens is cards will eventually fall out as you need them. So you may need to shuffle for a little bit, shuffle for a few minutes, maybe even a few seconds after you ask your question. You can often find answers popping out from the deck for you. So the first card we got here is the Ace of Swords. Now, when you are doing a new deck reading, I find it is often very beneficial for you to take a look at the guidebook and, you know, get a sense of this deck from the guidebook, because the artists of these decks often create the art and the meanings with specific messages behind them, and they usually go very well hand in hand. So in this book, we're going to just jump to the very first page. The Swords starts on page 111, 111. I love that. Let's go ahead and get there. All right, so here we are at the Swords, and we're going to start with the Ace of Swords. Now, right here at the bottom has a reverse message meaning here, so that's really cool. I really enjoy when decks put in reverse meanings, because it kind of saves you a little bit from, as a beginner, having to try to figure out how to interpret a reversal on your own. And then this guidebook actually has a things to consider option at the very end, which I think is a really cool thing to add. And then, you know, some keywords right here at the top, like new beginnings, clarity, and truth. So now here comes our interpretation, right? So the first question that I asked was, tell me a little bit about yourself. And we got the Ace of Swords in reverse. So this deck is kind of telling me that, you know, we can find new beginnings and clarity from this deck. This deck is more focused on providing an opportunity for people to learn about tarot and how to interpret it from their own perspective, from their own viewpoint. The Ace of Swords in the upright is about, breaking away from tradition and breaking away from things to forge your own path, to find your own meaning behind things. And so, finding deeper meaning and clarity behind your own actions is a really good way to be using this deck. Using it as a tool to examine your thought processes, your thought patterns, and to, try to do something different, forging your own path, doing things outside of the norm. So that's, what this deck is telling us a little bit, is that they kind of break away from the norm and they don't take tradition for tradition's sake. They kind of do things a little bit different. So let's go ahead and ask our second question, which is, how can I best work with your energy? What's the best way that I can use this deck to work with your energy? And so we actually got two cards. We got the Hanged Man and the Nine of Swords. So again, if you want to consult the guidebook as a beginner, you can absolutely do that. Don't be afraid to use a guidebook for your beginning tarot readings. This is where you're going to get some of your most valuable information on how to work with this specific deck. I am going to consult the guidebook very quick just because there are people on these cards and I want to use their proper pronouns. So the Hanged Man is Eli Bird, he, him. And then we have the Nine of Swords, Maddie, wager, or whatever, they, them. Okay, cool. That's very good to know. We have a he, him, and they, them. Without using the guidebook to interpret this, I'm just going to go based off of my own meanings. What is the best way to use this deck? The Hanged Man is about being in between two different points. It's about being stuck between worlds. The Hanged Man is a card that is like that breath, that last little piece, that little pause between life and the transition stage into death. So this deck is going to be very good to use when you are stuck in between two different places. It's going to be very helpful in providing you with a chance to look at both perspectives and to kind of think about, what direction, what path, or even, kind of get a glimpse at the future of where you are going next. What is your, afterlife in this case going to look like? And then the second card that we have here is the Nine of Swords. And this card is very much associated with anxiety, being caught up in your anxious thoughts. And so this deck is telling me that this is a good deck to use when you are feeling anxious, when you're feeling lost or stressed out. Use this deck to help give you a greater perspective or to help, break you out of this anxiety or anxious thought pattern. And let's pull one more card. We're going to pull one last card for this quick deck interview. And this card is going to be, what is the outcome of our relationship together, deck? I want to know, how are we going to work together? What's our future together kind of looking like? And we have the Two of Swords in reverse. So let's also, consult the guidebook, make sure we're using people's proper pronouns here. So that way we are not misgendering anybody. Two of Swords. So it says stalemate, blocked path, or impasse, right? For those little keywords here. And at the very end, we have the name and pronouns of this person, this model on the card, which is Elena Rubin, she, her. Okay, so the outcome of our relationship together is this Two of Swords. And I kind of am interpreting this as our, path is not really decided yet. The Two of Swords is about deciding between two different paths, two different opportunities to take moving forward. So the outcome of our relationship together is the Two of Swords in reverse. And so that tells me that, this deck may not necessarily be my primary deck in the future, but that, I still feel like we're going to have some time to figure out our directions, figure out the pieces together. And that, this card is about recognizing and overcoming obstacles. It's sometimes when we are faced with two different decisions or paths, we can find ourselves really stuck feeling like maybe one option isn't better than the other, and so we're kind of feeling like, there's no clear right or wrong answer for moving forward. And so this card is kind of telling me, there may not be a right answer or a wrong answer for how to use this deck. This deck is pretty much just going to be here when you need it, and that there doesn't have to be a definitive answer for our future together, and that we actually have, undecided multiple paths ahead, multiple options. So I know that's kind of a weird ending to have for this, to have, a deck tell us that our future together is a little bit undecided, but I think that's the reality of a lot of relationships, is that, things kind of have to be built slowly over time, and that, this is just the very beginning of our relationship, and you can't really say one way or the other where we're going to be going. So anyway, that was just a really quick, deck interview, kind of showing you the process of talking to your deck. And now this is probably for a lot of you going to be the very first time you ever take a look at tarot spreads. And if you are interested in more tarot spreads, I actually have 2 other videos where I talk about different types of tarot spreads, and another one more recent about the 3-card tarot spreads, which this can kind of be it's supposed to be a 3-piece tarot spread, but we kind of had 4 cards here. So I have another video if you want to go check it out about 3-card tarot spreads. And for a lot of you, this is going to be the very first time you ever do a tarot spread with your brand new deck. So this is a very good time to start trying to flex your tarot muscles a little bit and trying to get more familiar with working your brain around your intuition. And like I said, don't be afraid to use guidebooks. They are there for a reason. They're there to help guide you and give you clarity on what it is that you're reading in these cards. If you don't consult the guidebook, that's okay too. You can go completely based off your intuition and learn and, put your own identity, put your own definitions behind these cards for yourself, because ultimately at the end of the day, they're all going to mean something just a little bit different to everybody. So anyway, I hope that this guide was helpful for you beginner tarot readers in what to do when you get your first deck. Thank you so much for being here. If you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, maybe even consider subscribing. And I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video.